The fact that you have chosen to come here and have done it on the pretext of the types of text message, the types of tweets, the types of videos that have been put out seeking to harm people who are trying to keep this country safe is really disappointing.
Off your chest. So when we entered the arena, I reached out to the Doctors for Protection from Guns, to Poilievre, to all these groups and said, hey, our interests actually align. Why don't we work together? And you know what I got? I'm pro-murder. I'm a misogynist. I'm a racist. So much so that those words don't mean what they're supposed to mean anymore. That's how the other side engages. And when we send mean tweets, apparently, it's the end of the world, mean tweets, they're in response to the abuse that we've taken for 7 years. So, I don't know. You can put it all on my shoulders. I can take it.
Watch this witness destroy and attack this liberal. American studies done to influence and pass Canadian law. How's this possible? Witness comes to defend their property and dignity as a Canadian citizen. Is this liberal out of touch or out to lunch? Here's the clip.
I'll start with you, Dr. Kapoor. The studies that you just cited on suicide and homicide, can you tell us if those studies were done in the American or the Canadian context?
Most of those studies, I believe, were done in the American context. I believe there are some Canadian studies, but as I said in my opening comment, one of the things that we have repeatedly called for is the resources for research.
I agree with you. We definitely do need better data and information on this. I would just hope that you could table those studies that you cited to this committee, because I'd asked for them from other witnesses previously and they didn't hand them in. So I hope that I can get a commitment. If you have those studies available, could you table them to the committee so that we can review them at a later date? Something I was a bit concerned about, maybe this is an education opportunity, but is there anything, there's nothing stopping you as a doctor, as an emergency room doctor, any doctor, from calling police if you have a safety concern about somebody who owns firearms. Are you aware of that?
Well, there is actually a restraint on me from reporting things that are held confidential due to the medical relationship, the doctor-patient relationship. There are specific areas where I am relieved of my duty of confidentiality. For example, mandatory reporting of drivers. For where I have reason to believe someone has a condition that would make it dangerous for them to drive, there's specific legislation that relieves me of my confidentiality restriction. That doesn't necessarily apply in the situations that I'm describing here, where patients may have increased risk of suicidality or dementia and impulsive behavior. So that is a restriction.
That's interesting because, I've seen cases here in the Ottawa area where somebody had a mental breakdown and the doctors did call police and they seized his firearms, and he actually had to go to court to prove that he did not have a mental condition in order to get his, or that he had passed the mental condition, that it wasn't an issue, in order to get his firearms back. But that's very interesting. That's something we'll explore further. Thank you. Mr. Giltaca, would it be fair to say that your coalition represents the views of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of law-abiding firearm owners in this country?
Well, I don't think I could claim to represent that number of people, but that's pretty much the consensus, I think, of certainly most people that would have a restricted PAL, meaning they're licensed to own handguns, and certainly a great number of the 2.3 million other licensed Canadians that own a variety of different firearms.
Of course. We can't obviously speak for every single person, but a large constituency. Now, given how large of a constituency of people whose views you represent or align closely with, and the importance of firearms legislation to your community, it would seem prudent that any government consult with you guys about their proposals. Did the government consult with your organization, or, as far as you know, any like-minded organizations when drafting Bill C-21?
They haven't. We've been asking for a meeting with both ministers of public safety back in the Bill Blair days, and also the Prime Minister and anyone else we can think of, and we've never got a reply. So no.
So you're being ignored by this government. This Democratic government is ignoring the perspective of hundreds of thousands of Canadians who have concerns about legislation that disproportionately affects them, and you guys can't even get a meeting. That's very disturbing to me. The Liberal government has repeatedly said that their legislation doesn't target law-abiding firearms owners, but I think we've seen with C-71, the handgun freeze, and now C-21, that the primary impact of this legislation is solely on law-abiding handgun owners or law-abiding firearms owners. Why do you think that is?
Well, my personal opinion, it's ideological and it's political. I mean, that's why you would have provisions in the bill that have no meaningful, play no meaningful role in public safety. That's, yeah, I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but yeah, that's my opinion.
You know, it seems to me what's at stake here with this legislation is that there's an entire culture of people in this country who've been in this country for as long as even before we became a country, that are now going to be slowly phased out of existence by this government through this kind of legislation. It seems like they're phasing out law-abiding firearms owners, particularly handgun owners, but there's no evidence. Is there any evidence that this legislation will do anything to phase out the real problem, which is violent criminals?
Not that I'm aware of. I know that the government has had an opportunity in these hearings to provide evidence, and I haven't seen anything at all compelling so far, but that's not for me to judge.
Do you think it's kind of disturbing that it appears like, you know, an entire group of law-abiding people, a culture, you know, we've seen the mounted sport shooters, we've seen IPSC, we've seen Olympic sport shooters who've come to this committee. We've seen Indigenous people who earlier today said they weren't consulted, and said that this could potentially threaten their way of life and their treaty rights. Do you think it's kind of, you know, concerning that this government hasn't really consulted with any of these groups, and that this legislation seems to disproportionately impact them and have an impact only on them and not on violent criminals?
Well, we're used to it. This has been going on for 7 years, and it is very disappointing, and it's very divisive to have firearm-related violence laid at your feet, and have your life and your choices be viewed as repugnant, as I mentioned in my opening statement. It's very difficult, and it's difficult for literally hundreds of thousands of Canadians to feel like they're a part of anything now, because they're being blamed for something they have no part to play in. Yeah, it's difficult.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. We go now to Mr. Nur Mohammed, 6 minutes.
Thank you very much to the witnesses. And I'd like to start, Mr. Giltaca. You began by saying that you don't feel as though the government has paid much attention to you and to your views. So I'd like to change that now and pay some attention to you. You said that you speak for the vast majority of gun owners in this country. Is that true? Is that correct?
No, that's not
You
what I
don't
said.
speak for the vast majority of gun owners. So who do you speak for? I understand you just told Mr. Lloyd that you do. So do you speak for hundreds of thousands?
That's not what I said. We could play it back.
So who do you speak for?
I speak for, I'd say, I mean, if I were to guess, I would speak directly for maybe 100 or 200,000 people.
Do you speak for? That's a goodly sum of people. Do you do you believe that they all share your organization's views?
I don't think in our community people are very independently minded, and I don't think anyone shares all of each other's views.
I see.
No.
Okay. Your Vice President of Public Relations, Tracy Wilson, said on September 21st that she is the gun lobby. Does she speak for your organization?
I would say so. Yeah.
I see.
And I would say that's a correct statement. We are the gun lobby. Yeah.
Okay. So would you agree with her statement, and by extension, do you believe that it is the view of all of your members that we've survived 7 years of the most corrupt, divisive, hate-inciting, failed government of the history of our country? Do you feel
that's a pretty accurate statement, I'd say.
So you, sir, then have come here with a political agenda of your own. Is that correct?
I'm coming here to defend the property and my dignity as a Canadian citizen, actually.
I see. And does defending the property and dignity of yourself involve the harassment of other individuals, like my colleague Ms. Demoff?
Well, I would hope that your defense of this bill, it consists of more than mean tweets.
It's with respect to your organization and your vice president have appeared to have a very, very good grip on delivering mean tweets, but that's not why we're here. So let's
to the abuse that we've taken for 7 years.
I see. I'm sorry that you see the defense of saving lives as somehow abusive, but here we are. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you have said. You have said that mass shootings in Canada, which include Polytechnique, Concordia, Dawson, Moncton, Fredericton, Edmonton, Vernon, Quebec, Mosque, Penticton, Bucks Falls, and Nova Scotia, are just a small number of anomalies and outliers, and that you don't legislate to prevent such tragedies unless you're an irrational zealot. Is it your position that it's not worth trying to limit access to weapons that are commonly used in mass shootings because there are fewer such victims compared to other such gun crimes?
Well, it's my position that those are outlier events, considering, depending on how you define mass shooting, there's anywhere from 7 to 15 of those in the last 60 years in Canada. So they happen very infrequently, and they're terrible. No one's ever said that they weren't awful. Absolutely. But you don't legislate based on outliers any more than you legislate against white rental vans because we had a van attack. Those victims deserve just as much respect as any other victim. So that's just not how guns are they're the only topic where we act like this.
With the greatest of respect, when you talk about defending life, you talk about outliers. You don't talk about suicide in homes where guns do end up killing people. Do you think that it is reasonable when you look at the outlier incidences of whether it's suicide, whether it is criminal acts, that we should be doing everything we can to take away the tools that are causing those injuries or those deaths?
Our firearm suicides account for 14 to 16% of overall suicides in Canada. There's 4,000 suicides a year around.
You don't think that's too many?
Yeah, one suicide's too many. But
so shouldn't we be doing everything we can to prevent those suicides?
We are doing an incredible. We have some of the toughest gun control laws on planet Earth.
On planet Earth. And do you support those tough gun control laws?
I support any law that has a demonstrable positive effect on public safety.
And so if the police were to come before this committee, as they have, including the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, who came before this committee, as well as other law enforcement, and said that they believe that limiting firearms in homes would prevent suicides, would you agree with them?
We do limit firearms in homes.
They said that further limiting through this bill firearms in homes would further prevent suicides. Are you saying they're wrong?
Well, I can't speak for the Association of Chiefs of Police. They've given you their opinion, and I've given you mine.
But do you disagree with their opinion?
I don't know. I'd have to think about it a little bit more.
So, but either you do. I'm sorry, I'm confused. Earlier you said that it wouldn't help prevent.
I think that the laws that we have right now are adequate. Firearms can be removed from anyone's home on a moment's notice if there's a safety concern.
But
I'm not sure how we can get.
How quickly?
I'm not sure how we can get any better than that without banning guns.
Well, listen, I mean, that's an interesting
You're
suggestion,
advocating
sir.
for the nuclear option right out of the gate. You won't even try anything else.
I don't think it's the nuclear option, sir, when the law enforcement are coming before this committee and saying that fewer guns in homes will mean fewer people die.
So what else did they say?
Well, you're welcome to go back and listen to their testimony where they also said, sir, that the number of firearms that are available to people the fewer firearms there are, the fewer likely instances of crime they're going to see. So, I mean, unless we all want to disagree with law enforcement, unless we want to say that the cops who are trying to keep our streets safe are wrong, sir, I think you and your organization may wish to reconsider your position on whether or not having fewer firearms is actually good things for this purported goal that you have of keeping Canada safer. And with the greatest of respect, sir, I think that in order to build legitimacy for one's cause, it would be helpful, as others have done before this committee, who have come to this committee with differing views than us, who have had the ability to do so and to engage in ways that did not actually involve harassing members of this committee, sir, I think we would be much more interested in hearing your views. But I have to tell you, the fact that you have chosen to come here and have done it on the pretext of the types of text messages, the types of tweets, the types of videos that have been put out seeking to harm people who are trying to keep this country safe is really disappointing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. I'll give the witness a chance to respond if you wish.
I'm glad you got that off your chest. So when we entered the arena, I reached out to the Doctors for Protection from Guns, to Poilievre, to all these groups and said, hey, our interests actually align. Why don't we work together? And you know what I got? I'm pro-murder. I'm a misogynist. I'm a racist. So much so that those words don't mean what they're supposed to mean anymore. That's how the other side engages. And when we send mean tweets, apparently, it's the end of the world, mean tweets, they're in response to the abuse that we've taken for 7 years. So, I don't know. You can put it all on my shoulders. I can take it.